everybody. I'm Caryn Hartglass. You are listening to It's All About Food. Oh my goodness. Breathing. Breathing is always the most foundational, important thing for humans to do at any time, especially now. And I'm almost choking up thinking about it. This has been a very difficult week for many people. Some people are very happy and ecstatic, although I think they have some surprises in store for them because I don't think they realize what they were getting into. Okay, what am I talking about? First, I want to invite my guest, and then we'll get into the reason why I have my guest on, but also what's going on today. So I am with Isabella La Rocca González, who is an artist and an activist based in the United States. Her work is part of a long tradition in art and photography to bring the light and find beauty in the disregarded, hidden, or unconscious. As a first-generation American, she strives to reconcile values from her Indigenous Mexican roots with her European heritage. Her photographs have been exhibited internationally, including a solo show at the Center for Photography in Woodstock, New York. Her creative nonfiction works have been published in various venues, including the Women Eco Artist Dialog magazine and the Everything from Nothing journal. Her screenplay, Fugue 9, was chosen as a finalist for the 2008 Sundance Screenwriters Lab. She received her BA in Fine Arts from the University of Pennsylvania and her MFA in Photography from Indiana University. After 30 years teaching art and photography on the post-secondary level, she has left academia to devote herself full-time to her art practice and to growing a native pollinator garden. Isabella, it's so nice to see you again.
It is great to see you too, Caryn, and thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so I want to be upfront. We had recorded a podcast last week based on Isabella's new book, Censored Landscape, and I forgot to push the record button. I have never done that in 15 years of preparing shows, but I did it. And it was a really good show. I thought it was a great interview, but now this one's going to be better. And surprisingly, everything has changed. The board game, the rules, everything has changed from just a week ago. Mm-hmm. Which is why your book, Censored Landscape, is more important than ever. Yeah. So before we delve into the book, I don't know, I have to purge, I have to breathe, I have to share some thoughts because I'm really devastated. Mm-hmm. I thought Americans could do better than we did. And while we've learned that the president-elect, whose name I really cannot put in my mouth, while we've learned that he did not get a mandate, which he says he got, and we are learning that he did not win by very, very much. He did win, unfortunately. We are learning that Democrats did not come out in the numbers that they've come out in before. So people didn't show up. And it's just mind-boggling to me why that happened. It's mind-boggling that women didn't show up in bigger numbers or didn't show up to vote for a very, very skilled woman or a very, very skilled human being who happens to be a woman and happens to be a person of color. And those things in the 21st century should not matter. But the reason why it matters is because when you are a woman and when you are a person of color, you have to be so much better than your white male competition. And so we know this was an incredible candidate, incredible. And I never agree with every politician that's out there. There's so many issues that aren't even on the table that should be. But we want to move society forward. And I know that Kamala Harris was an excellent and the best choice. And when we think about what we could have had and what could have happened, we get choked up, right? And people don't even realize what they voted for. Some people think they voted for the economy, which is just insane, which means you know nothing about the economy. You know that presidents really don't have much impact on the economy, although Biden, who, I don't love or hate, but I thought he was really excellent for the time because he could compromise. He could bring all sides together. And he did amazing things for this economy. People don't even want to realize, yeah, we have inflation and yeah, food costs are higher, but that's because of COVID, the pandemic, and how it was poorly managed by the person who's coming back into office. And also because of the wars that are going on. And if anybody thinks I'm a pacifist, I don't believe in war. But if you think we shouldn't be supporting the Ukraine, that's all about supporting democracy. Because if Russia starts eating away at the Ukraine, they're just going to move right along into the next countries that they want. Okay, anyway, so many dots here. And then immigration, don't get me started. I mean, we know that this mass deportation thing is an insane, crazy project. Yes, our federal government could do a lot better to manage incoming immigrants, the ones that are coming in legally and the ones that are coming in illegally. It can be much better managed, and we need those people.
Yes.
And anybody who studies immigrants, we know that they make the best Americans. They work hard. Ugh. And how much is it going to cost to build these refugee camps, concentration camps?
Yes.
Yeah, it's going to be insanely. I just hope it never happens. But meanwhile, we're going to get to your book, Censored Landscape, in a moment. But I want to say my activism has always been about reducing pain and suffering, especially for the voiceless, the animals. And this started for me when I was a teenager. And it's something that our government does not address. And there has been so much violence and cruelty and torture in the United States for so long, and it's not getting any better. Yeah. Cows and pigs and chickens, these are exploited, innocent beings, separated from their families, separated from their children. They cannot see the light of day, many of them, and stretch their legs and wings. They're fed garbage. They're diseased, and then they get slaughtered. And our government accepts this, and our population accepts this. We are a violent nation that started with violent beginnings, violent exploitive beginnings. So we really can't be surprised that we're here with an incoming government that wants to exploit, that wants to be violent, that wants to spread hate, that does not want to help those in need, that wants to make fun of those in need. But we cannot give up. We have to stay strong, otherwise they win. And hopefully we won't have an authoritarian government where we run out of choices. Okay, that's my opening monologue. Again, thanks for joining me on It's All About Food. And I'm so happy to be speaking here today with Isabella La Rocca González, who has so much to share with us.
Well, Caryn, first of all, I want to say what you just said was beautifully put. I think that so many of us share this devastating emotion that we're feeling. I also want to say that now that we are not able to rely on our governments and those leaders more than ever before, and that was poorly put, but we cannot rely on corporations, on governments, on these people who call themselves leaders. We must individually do everything we can to improve life for all beings on Earth. We are in the midst of a climate crisis. Wars just are caused by climate crisis. There is a connection. And we, as individuals, have the power every single day to do something about it without relying on these charlatans who call themselves leaders, by being mindful about what we eat and what we consume. And yes, I'm talking about animals because, like you, I have to stand up against the mass atrocity that has occurred on billions of sentient beings every year. But I'm also talking about taking care of each other and taking care of ourselves and taking care of the planet all of which is addressed by what we consume. So I just wanted to put that out there, that we are not helpless. There is something we can do every day to combat this devastating global tragedy that is occurring because of our country and the way we chose to vote or not vote.
Exactly. I like to say, get the violence off your plate. For those who are upset by violence, it starts right on the plate. Okay. Now, I'm breathing again.
Yes.
We like to say we breathe for a living. And breathing really helps us get through very difficult situations when we breathe mindfully. So I can't do that enough right now.
Yes.
Censored landscapes. The first thing that I need to talk about with you, Isabella, with regard to this book is the title. Because it's a brilliant title. And it hit me in a profound way. Just trying to comprehend what those two words mean. Censored landscapes. It's brilliant. I said that it was brilliant. I'm saying it again. Tell me, what does it mean to you, and how did you come up with the title?
Yes. So this project started because in 2012, a battery cage egg farm was abandoned by the owners. Inside were 50,000 hens that were starving, left without water in these cages. Now, life before they were abandoned was hellish, but as you can imagine, now they have no food, no water. Life became even, their cage mates are dying. They're crammed into these tiny cages, 4, 5, 6 in a cage, their whole lives. And for 2 weeks, they languished. State officials discovered them and then began gassing them. That was the state official solution.
How could any of them survive 2 weeks?
And believe it or not, 17,000 were still surviving after
Wow.
2 weeks. And they began gassing them, but animal sanctuaries and animal activists came in and negotiated with the state officials to rescue, and 4,460 of these hens were rescued and taken to our beloved animal sanctuaries, the most marvelous, peaceful places in our country. Now, a year later, I went out there to photograph this facility. I did not, I'm ashamed to say, I did not participate in the rescue. I didn't really know about it until afterward. But I just wanted to go out and see for myself what one of these facilities looked like and photograph it, because that's what I do. I photograph things just to kind of understand them, to try to make sense of them. Went out, photographed it, and that inspired this project, because what I realized is that the majority of the animals that people consume are bred, confined, and slaughtered in hidden warehouses, where many of us drive by and don't even realize that in this, I call them warehouses, people call them barns, people call them CAFOs, factory farms, whatever you want to call them. They are inside in just extremely confined conditions, in the most horrible conditions, hellacious conditions. And we drive by, we don't even recognize that inside these places are tens, if not hundreds of millions of animals just being tortured, basically, for their whole lives. And so I decided that I wanted to photograph these places. I do not have the heart to be an investigative activist. I have the utmost respect for people who can do that. I don't have the courage. I don't have the courage to do that.
Sure.
But I am a photographer. I love landscape photography. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to photograph the landscapes in which these places are located. And part of the problem with even doing that is that in half of state legislatures, the industry has attempted to pass ag-gag laws that makes it illegal to photograph these places.
Hmm.
And they are still in existence in 6 states. So I did not break any laws in doing this. I minimally trespassed. There were times when I felt it was safe and I trust like this first, facilities. There was nobody there. There were signs that said, biohazard or something like that. So I possibly was trespassing. But I was very careful to follow the law. There are no graphic images of the treatment of animals in this book. These are landscape photographs that I wanted to follow in the long tradition of American landscape photography. And so the reason that it's called censored landscapes is because even though in the places where I photographed, there were no ag-gag laws, I was not welcome there. This nobody wanted me there. There were times when I was chased, when I was threatened. I was not breaking the law, and yet I was not free to photograph the landscape where these facilities are located.
So the facilities that don't allow people to photograph them, that includes their exterior? That if you're
Yes.
you have a drone or something, you can't photograph them?
In some states. Now, I'm not 100% up on
Okay.
what is currently legal where. These things change. Happily, we have great nonprofits like the Animal Legal Defense Fund who are constantly having to appeal and litigate these laws, which are against the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America. But so it's, it changes. But yes, there have been laws where you're not even allowed to photograph the exterior, where drones are forbidden anywhere in the area. So yes, and even when there's no law on the books, many times law enforcement in these places is on the side of the farmers. And even though you may be in the right, law enforcement is not going to protect you very well, if at all.
Yeah, we know that. And that's part of the reason why I'm not breathing easily in this moment, because although we're talking about animal agriculture, which is a horrific thing, this type of activity, I'm putting in air quotes, law enforcement, can turn against many of us as activists in the future. If we don't
Absolutely.
toe the
There is a
line.
law. Yeah, there's a law in the books called the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act that if you interfere with the profits, that's a big term, of any animal enterprise, you will be labeled as a terrorist. In other words, categorized in there with Timothy McVeigh and the Unabomber. And
Exactly.
I think that we have reason to fear because this administration has already started to take action to make nonprofits, to dismantle nonprofits because they are terrorists. And I'm using air quotes here.
Yeah. Okay. The full title of your book is Censored Landscapes, The Hidden Reality of Farming Animals. Just wanted to add that tag because that's what it really is all about. You mentioned early in the book the dreadful, dreaded dread. That really struck me because 18 years ago when I was going through my advanced ovarian cancer experience, and yes, I should be dead, but I'm alive, I'm grateful and thriving, I would wake up in the morning to something I called the belly of dread. And I'm someone who's never really had a problem sleeping. And as a child, I didn't really have anything traumatic happen to me. And most of the time I would just wake up in my normal adult life and be ready for the day until this disease had happened to me. And I would wake up with this belly of dread. And it took years, but I really wasn't having that anymore until probably this week. The belly of dread is back. Can you tell me about your dreaded dread?
Yes, that's what I call what I feel sometimes. I've had insomnia for many, many, many years. And there are times when I wake up with the dreadful, dreaded dread. It's this visceral, it's in my belly, just you describe it beautifully. It's very visceral. It's in my belly. For me, I believe it's connected to my father's. My father was orphaned in World War II. He lived on the streets for 2 years as a child and then was put in an orphanage. And when I was growing up, he woke up often in the middle of the night with night terrors, yelling, very upset. And I think that affected me. I think it's in my cells. And so that essay that you're referring to, called Connection, does have a healing ending, is a personal story. And in this book, what I attempted to do was make the micro the macro. In other words, as I was learning about this industry, I could relate it to so many facets of my own personal life, because I do believe, I think the saying is the personal is the political. And so, and I do believe that storytelling is a very effective way of bringing people together, of helping people understand something that might be just eyes glaze over with statistics and facts, but when it's a personal story, it becomes much more engaging and much more meaningful. So the the story I wrote, Connection, it's a creative nonfiction story. Connection starts with that dread that I've experienced many times in the middle of the night. And then I talk about how that was somewhat or very healed for me by feeling a connection with all sentient beings on this planet.
This is a good time to take a deep breath again.
Yes.
Breathe in, breathe out that dread. Numbers can be very useful and very powerful. So on your landscapes, for example, which to some, if they didn't know that they came from the book Censored Landscape, The Hidden Reality of Farming Animals, they would just look like middle America, farmland, pastoral grounds, peaceful, colorful, serene, calm, and yet it's quite the opposite of what's going on inside. And to give power to those peaceful, serene, tranquil landscapes that you photographed, you give the numbers. Can you talk about that?
Yes, I wanted to somehow represent the vast number of animals in the facilities within these landscapes. So I researched how many animals were permitted to be bred, confined, or slaughtered in these facilities. And so with each photograph is a number that represents the number of animals confined, bred, slaughtered in that facility.
Speaking of numbers, you give a lot of facts in your book. So we have those lovely photographs, but then there are pages of line after line after line after line of the facts, the truth. And some of those facts include how much money taxpayers spend to support this exploitation, to exploit this torture, this cruelty, which is not only horrific for animals, but it's also dreadful for the environment. We know that animal agriculture is one of the top, if not the major contributor to human-induced greenhouse gases causing global warming today, and all other types of pollution, air, water, soil, biodiversity degradation, and also increasing our risk of chronic disease by consuming these poor animals. Okay, we're paying for it. We're supporting it. And we support it through subsidies, and the USDA spends so much money supporting all of these different livestock industries. And I'm wondering, in the new administration, which is hoping to cut all kinds of things out of our budget, including Social Security and Medicare, although they backtrack on that sometimes because it scares people, but it is part of the Project 25, over 900 pages, and something that is, we know, is a playbook for the incoming White House. I got to breathe again. I mean, I would love it if we're going to cut expenditures. Animal agriculture should be at the top. Let's just stop subsidizing. Let's pay the true cost of producing these products I was struggling there because I'm talking about paying the cost of raising these animals in horrific conditions and torturing them ultimately so that we can have our meat and fish and dairy. Numbers.
Yeah. Numbers. Oh, in the recent past, an average of $2 billion a year has been allocated to, as they call themselves, livestock operators. This does not include the amounts of products that the government buys when there are overages of these products. It does not include the amount of money that the government spends on research to prop up this industry. This is just a minimal. Something like 0.5% to 2% of that is spent on subsidies for fruits and vegetables. And anybody knows that fruits and vegetables are the healthiest thing you could possibly eat. And yet our government spends next to nothing on that, and next to nothing on plant alternatives to protein. But it doesn't end there. It's also that the industry has highly paid lobbyists who are making it so these subsidies continue. And more and more our government has become empowered by money. Money is more important than citizenship, than votes, than anything else. Since Citizens United in the 90s, it is legal, basically in an underhanded way, to pay our representatives in government to do what the moneyed people want them to do. And this industry has a lot of power in the form of money. This is also a timely issue because, as you know, avian flu is a problem. They try to make us feel like it's not really a problem. It's not going to spread to humans. But the government has spent $2 billion in the last few years to, in the most cruel way, as they put it, depopulate millions of birds, of chickens. Basically, they're cooked to death. And this is what our government is paying for. They pay 100% of the costs to have these animals enclosed in barns that get hotter and hotter and hotter, so the animals die and are therefore, as they put it, depopulated. I believe it's been, yes, $2 billion. And I believe so far, and I may have this number wrong, but so far it's 200 million hens have been killed in this.
You know, you say the government pays for it. We pay for it.
Yes.
We pay
Yes.
for this very incompetent, inefficient, cruel industry to continue. And if it was a business that wasn't supported by the government, they would be bankrupt by now. They couldn't survive, because not only are they creating a horrific product, but the way they do it it's insane. And
So
we
these
support that.
subsidies are incentivizing these horribly cruel practices.
Yes.
They're not only in subsidizing them, they're incentivizing them. It makes it more profitable for these corporations to continue doing business as usual.
I'm juggling with the advantages and disadvantages of mass deportation. I'm not for it at all. But keep in mind that the people that work in these horrific industries are the immigrants, many of them who came to this country illegally. And when you come into a country illegally, you're going to do whatever you're told because you don't want to make trouble. So the companies of these animal agriculture businesses, Cargill and Tyson's, whatever, they know this, and they take advantage by paying them very little and treating them very poorly. There's all kinds of exploitation that goes on. So not only are the animals being treated poorly, but the workers are as well, and they cannot protest. You know, some people talk about all the crime that these undocumented workers cause, and the statistics show that that's simply not true. But if you are going to treat a human being as the lowest thing possible, if you're going to starve them and not pay them, They may resort to doing things that are not legal just to survive. None of the policies in either administration make sense when it comes to animal agriculture, and this needs to change. Nothing makes sense when it comes to this corporate power. Corporations should not have the same rights as humans, and they shouldn't be able to amass so much power. And, I wanted to say earlier that individuals shouldn't be able to amass so much financial power either. And some will say, well, if they're clever and they can make this much money. No, the laws currently are written in an unfair way to enable the very few to amass a tremendous amount of money. If the laws were rewritten to be fair to everyone, we wouldn't have these multi-billionaires. Because how much does one person need to survive or to take care of their family? And when a handful of people have more money than you could even imagine, that comes with power, and democracy is at stake when that happens. I'm thinking of even Bill Gates. Some people don't like him. I don't know much about him, but he's got this Gates Foundation. I don't even know what it's called anymore since he's been divorced. But I haven't liked a lot of the projects that he's supported because he believes in technology. And we know that when it comes to food and food distribution and food insecurity, it's not technology that's going to help us. When we give so much power, financial power, to individuals, they make decisions for the population. And that's not fair.
Absolutely not. Economic inequality has been growing since neoliberal policies really took hold. So, this whole idea of making America great again, well, part of what people are nostalgic for is when economic equality was much more, there was much more economic equality. Now we have a huge amount, as you put it, there's the 1% and then everybody else. And we're all struggling for that tiny piece of the pie. And speaking about the workers, it's not just immigrants. The workers this is the most dangerous industry. Animal agriculture is the most dangerous industry. So no matter who you are within this industry, but the great majority of the workers in this industry are people of color. 37.5% of the people who work in this industry are foreign born. We don't know how many there are that are undocumented. We don't know. The other thing to know about this is that during the last mass deportation, they went to the places of work. They went to these Tyson facilities, they went to these slaughterhouses, and they rooted out the illegals, as they call them, the undocumented immigrants. Their lives were made miserable. They were separated from their families. Some were sent home. It was terrible, terrible.
Wait. Some were sent home. You have to even be careful about that, because what they consider home, it may not even be their home, or it may be such a violent place.
Thank you. I'm glad you brought that up. Some were sent to where they came from, where they were desperately trying to save themselves and survive from.
Yeah.
Sent back. But did anyone in the corporations suffer anything? The people who were actually exploiting these people, there may have been a few small fines, part of the cost of doing business, but that was it. The people who were actually responsible were not held accountable. And yet these impoverished people who were trying to survive despite all odds, their lives were made worse, and the communities where they were living were made worse. I don't want to believe that this time it will be as bad, because, as you know, immigrant parents were separated from their immigrant children. To this day, 1,000 children are still missing from their families because of that last fiasco.
Breathing,
trying to breathe.
Trying to breathe. Okay.
Yes.
I think my favorite part in the book is page 45. And you go into a lot of different things on page 45. But you talk about indigenous people in North and Central America. I'm reading from the book. Indigenous people in North and Central America did not farm animals. They produced tasty, nutritious food for themselves without breeding or caging other animals. Cows, pigs, chickens, goats, and sheep did not exist in the Americas. Farmed animals were brought by the Europeans, along with alcoholism, epidemics, and firearms. It's a brilliant, brilliant paragraph, Isabella. And also in this paragraph is you, because you're part indigenous to Central America, North America, and also you've got the European part in you. Are you schizophrenic? How do you make sense of all the history within you?
Yes, well, it has presented a challenge to me over the years, because you're right, and this is true of many Mexicans, is that, we are part colonizer, part indigenous. And but for me, it has helped to stabilize my identity. We moved a lot when I was a kid. In my life, I've moved 26 times.
Wow.
And yeah. And um, part of what has given me stability is studying indigenous cultures, because those cultures were here long before the colonists came. And understanding that these were advanced civilizations and that those are my roots, as well as the roots from the other side. My father's Italian, or was Italian, and I just love Italian culture. So these two cultures are part of my roots, and I have benefited quite a bit from studying these cultures and understanding how advanced, especially the indigenous culture, was before colonization, because it was blurred or even erased by the colonizers.
Mm.
And when I was in college, there was no such thing as Chicano studies or indigenous studies, nothing like that. So my understanding of it is, kind of piecemeal and reading this and reading that, but it has benefited me a lot. And what I learned that is close to my heart and close to your heart is that, in fact, indigenous people did not farm animals in North and Central America. They did not subjugate animals. There was subsistence hunting for sure. They didn't have a Safeway or a Kroger within, 10 minutes the way we do. But they did not treat animals as something to be farmed. And all of those species of animals that people are eating now were part of a colonialist past and not part of an indigenous past. In addition, indigenous agriculture was far more eco-harmonious than the agricultural system than we have now. They practiced agroforestry. They practiced systems of canals to water the plants. They practiced companion planting, like the Three Sisters, beans and squash. They practiced agriculture in a way that now is being recognized as a possible way forward for the havoc that our agricultural industry is wreaking on the planet. And I'm talking now about animal agriculture, but I'm also talking about the monocultures and the duocultures, because in fact, we're growing plants to feed animals, to feed humans. 70% of corn and virtually 50% of soy is grown to feed animals.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a grossly inefficient. And that corn, that soy, they're grown as monocultures and duocultures that require fossil fuel-based fertilizers, require pesticides, herbicides, and all kinds of poisons that then run off into our waterways and poison us and poison the marine animals. And it's not a sustainable way of agriculture. Indigenous people understood that there's a way of raising plants that is much more harmonious with wild nature.
The colonists came through to this continent, raping, pillaging, exploiting not only people, but animals and the earth. And now we are living in the results of their actions.
Mhm.
And interestingly, I'd like to say the incoming administration in the White House will want to cover up that history that we're trying now to rediscover and spread around the country and the world, because not only is it important for individuals to know their real history, but it's important for us to learn from it because we've made so many mistakes.
Mhm.
And the First Nations knew so much about caring for the planet. They weren't perfect. None of us are, but they knew about agriculture. I remember one of the stories we learned as children, how the Indians taught us, how the colonists, they taught the colonists how to grow corn, and it was a beautiful thing. And that was like the one nice thing. And then we just blew everybody up. Oh dear. Okay. I love talking about the three sisters, especially around Thanksgiving time, beans, corn, and squash. They help each other growing, they nourish each other, and then they're wonderful together, colorful and beautiful and nutritious. They complete each other in nutrients that we need. It's just so harmonious.
Yes, those three plants can be, are 100% of what you need nutritionally. They provide all the amino acids, many of the vitamins and minerals that you need nutritionally. It's just a beautiful, harmonious relationship.
And they're delicious together.
Yes.
I love making like a pumpkin centerpiece, which is carved out, and inside are beans and corn and herbs and spices and a nice sauce, whatever. But that's the three together. It's a beautiful centerpiece and something to celebrate and be thankful for.
Yes. Yes.
All right. Briefly, you talked about wildlife services. I'm smiling when I'm saying this, and I'm being very sarcastic. They're an arm of the USDA. And what they do is they exterminate wild animals primarily for the benefit of private ranchers. What would you like to say about wildlife services, Isabella?
Oh, it's just.
And we pay for them.
Yes. Yes. We pay for this federal agency to exterminate, which is a euphemism for what they do.
Well, in your book, it says in 2021, Wildlife Services killed 404,538 native animals, including gray wolves, coyotes, black bears, mountain lions, bobcats, foxes, beavers, eagles, falcons, hawks, and animals. They also destroyed coyote dens, as well as pocket gopher and prairie dog burrows. The number was relatively low, you write. In 2019, Wildlife Services killed 1.2 million native animals, and they've killed as many as 5 million animals a year.
Yes.
That's in the book, Censored Landscape, The Hidden Reality of Farming Animals by Isabella.
Yes, yes. And here's the thing. They ensnare them with neck snares, with leg hold traps. They put explosives into their dens. They shoot them from the air. And all of this is done at the behest of private ranchers who are grazing their lands on our public lands at a minimal cost to them, a laughably low long-term lease, so that
We like
they
to call it welfare ranching, because
exactly.
these ranchers get to use our public land for very little, and yet people that need assistance with food insecurity, the welfare moms, are harassed and insulted and with many people thinking it's not fair to support them, but it is fair to support ranchers, mostly white men, who want to use our land and not rent it for any sensible price, something way, 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 way below any kind of market rate,
Absolutely.
to graze and then destroy that land. It's not very good land for for growing, or so they say. Although we probably could be growing certain crops that would nourish the soil and make it more fertile, but we don't do that. We allow animals to graze and then they destroy it even further.
Absolutely. And here's another big irony. There's this whole movement that has been co-opted by the regenerative agriculture movement called grass-fed beef. This has been held up as this jewel in the crown. And those are the words I use of the progressives in this country. It's better, it's tastier, they claim it's better for the environment. There are charlatans who are claiming that it'll actually reverse climate change. And the reason they say this is because they claim that these domesticated cows mimic the grazing patterns of ancient ruminants like bison and buffalo. Now, this has been widely debunked by scientists and analysts, well-regarded scientists and analysts. Debunked. But of course, this continues to be trotted out. The main proponents, of course, of this greenwash is ranchers. And here's the big irony, is that Wildlife Services then kills bison and buffalo, the real ancient ruminants, when they get too close to the domesticated cows that are purportedly saving the earth. And to make things worse, grass-fed beef is actually worse for the environment, requires more land, emits more greenhouse gases, requires more water. So on all fronts, it's just an ironic, tragically ironic greenwash.
Yeah. And those animals that they say are grass-fed, most of them are typically fattened on a feedlot before they're slaughtered, so they're not entirely grass-fed. And also we know that in order to raise the amount of animals we are raising for food today, we'll need several earths to be able to grass feed these animals. So it's not really a sensible or sustainable proposal. Moving on, page 57. You talked about Upton Sinclair and his book, The Jungle. And I have to admit that up until that point, the information in your book was uncomfortable. There wasn't anything that I didn't know because I've been involved in animal activism for so many decades. But at this point, I cried. I don't know if it was all of the information leading up to it, and then finally I'm in the middle of the book and it's just enough. But that was a powerful book, and we did make some interesting changes in our law because of that book, although it was more about the people, right, rather than the animals.
That's correct. Actually, that book made me a vegetarian when I was that, and another book made me a vegetarian when I was a teenager.
What was the other book?
The other book was Diet for a Small Planet.
Okay, Francis Moore Lepay. The 50th edition came out last year or a couple of years ago.
Yes, those two books influenced me to become a vegetarian. Unfortunately, it took a long while for me to become a vegan. I'm ashamed about that. But when we know better, we do better. But anyway, that book, The Jungle by Upton Sinclair, was written in 1905. Wow. And it was really about the plight of the immigrants who worked in the slaughterhouse industry in Chicago at the time. And it did have the influence eventually to clean up the industry for humans.
The Jungle, this should be required reading for everyone, not just to learn about what we do to animals, but to learn about immigrants and how hard their lives are. And Absolutely. How all they want to do is work and take care of their families.
Correct. Yes, yes.
And what we do is we take advantage of them, we exploit them, we pay them the minimum, below minimum wage, because companies can get away with that. Out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly. Yeah. And this book was written in 1905.
1905. Well,
it's been over a century later.
I don't know what you've been reading, but all week I've been reading many different opinion pieces about how we got to where we are after the election. Heather Cox Richardson is somebody that I really enjoy following and reading every day. The book, The Jungle, is so important because of what was going on at that time with the immigrants. But it seems like every century or so, history somewhat repeats itself. Not exactly the same way, but people are struggling and they get manipulated by the people in power, and they believe that they're going to be doing things for them. And instead, the reverse happens. They get more rights taken away from them. And it's happening now. And people don't realize what they voted for.
Yeah, and I think part of the power game play is to pit the people, the working class, the workers class against each other and start pointing fingers at each other rather than holding those in power accountable, instituting the problems that are pitting the working class against each other. And to me, it seems very clear that that's what's happening now.
Yeah, we have something called the rule of law, and it's meaningless if people don't follow it and support it. And so we have an incoming group coming into the White House who want to dismantle the rule of law. And hopefully there are some people in Congress, both parties, who have some balls and try and respect the rule of the law and keep it in practice. Otherwise, we're in big trouble. Last thing I wanted to touch on in your book is your conversation about non-consensual sex. And this is something that, okay, I don't know what people know about animal agriculture, but they certainly don't know about this. I know that when we talk about not eating animals, one of the questions people say is, what are you going to do with all the animals that are here? And 10 years ago, I was on a panel talking about animal agriculture and climate change, and I was the sole vegan. It was the night before a bull sale at a feedlot in Nevada. I survived. Gary, my partner, and I went together, and we were kind of scared. But I was in my vegan cowgirl hat and boots. I looked like everybody else. I sang the Star Spangled Banner. They were appreciative of that. And I gave my short little speech, and we had a very brief debate. There wasn't much time for the whole thing. But people came up to me afterwards, and they were basically saying, you know, what about all these animals on the planet? And these were the cattle ranchers. These were the people that were breeding the animals. That's how in denial they are. But you talk in the book a bit about breeding. And what's so horrifying about it is you have universities that publish online how to do this artificial insemination, which is this nice way to put it. But it's quite pornographic. It's quite violent. It's quite evil. I don't know how the people that do this can do this. It's molestation. It's rape. And this is for the dairy industry. This is for all animal agriculture, all animals involved in this exploitation.
Yes. 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 I mean, many people don't even know that cows have to be pregnant to give milk, just like humans. They don't, you know, people will say to me, well, you have to milk the cows or they get uncomfortable. No, they don't get uncomfortable if their babies are suckling the way babies are meant to suckle at their mother's breast. But the babies are taken away in a horrific ordeal for both mother and baby, and the mother's milk is taken. But in order for that milk to be present, those dairy cows must be pregnant. And the method for that impregnation is basically horrendous. It's pornographic, as you put it. In my book, I paraphrased industry descriptions of the process. But yes, it's done by humans to animals. The enclosure that is used to restrain the dairy cows during this process is colloquially described as a rape rack by the workers. And these are workers who are doing this. What does it do to the workers to be doing these, to be sexually molesting these animals? And this happens in all facets of animal agriculture. All turkeys, speaking of Thanksgiving, are artificially inseminated.
Yeah.
And this means that both the female animal and the male animal are stimulated sexually in order to complete the process.
It's sick and insane, and we're out of time.
On that note.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big conversation, but you've brought up so many important things in your book. And I want to thank you so much for your book and your writing and your activism. Isabella La Rocca González, your book, Censored Landscape, so important. It's something people can have and have their guests open it up and look and start a conversation. Whatever it is, we need to have this conversation, and people need to know more about what's going on behind the walls. I just briefly want to mention you have some poems by Rosemary Alice, Supermoon, and Chloe Hansen, Dairy Pride, and also a wonderful piece by Patrice Jones. We love Patrice, The Persistence of Pigeons. Oh, I didn't get to talk about pigeons today, but perhaps another time. Thank you, Isabella. And I wish you great success with your book, and just hugging and breathing here. Thank you for being who you are. We'll get through this, right?
Yes, hopefully we will get through this. And thank you very much for all you do, Caryn. You are a big influence on many people. And I also want to thank the listeners who are listening to this podcast, because that means that you are at the very least willing, if not already, making the changes that are necessary.
Okay, thank you. Be well. Everybody, have a delicious week.
you